Good evening, Tom. Long time no chat.
Yeah, good evening. How are you?
Doing all right. Uh, Let me see here. I'm going to make you a co-host because that's how I keep you accountable, Tom.
Oh, thank you very much. I definitely need that.
You do. I'm your accountability buddy for the evening.
Sounds like a plan. It's funny watching these people's responses and how upset they get, and then the really like moronic replies. Just it's like you guys don't even have a good script. It's very weak. It's not fun. It's not cool. It's not persuasive.
I feel like we're at the stage of that conflict where they're sending the child soldiers. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah,
throwing those into the conflict.
yeah,
It's kind of sad, actually. They don't know
yeah.
what's coming for them. When our boy Joe is reelected, it's going to be. He promised us no malarkey. He named his tour the No Malarkey Tour. Okay. And for once, we have an honest politician delivering no malarkey.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people pulling malarkey, and I think it'll get so crazy, particularly with, I mean, just look at, like this stupid stunt of putting one-eyed Dan Crenshaw, down in charge of trying to do something with the drug cartels. What's really funny is when you read the beginning of that article, Kevin McCarthy is going to give him a crack at it, not because crack is a drug that I find that funny. This is just a stunt is all it is. It's stupid and it's pathetic that it's not, it should be laughed and ridiculed and shamed and give these people no quarter.
Well, of course, we all know that Kevin McCarthy, that Dan Crenshaw has been running for president since he could breathe. And so this is what's going on there. There's a lot of weird Dan Crenshaw stuff, which
He's
I've
way
written
he's
about.
way too short, and people as short as him should never be given the reins of power.
I agree. Listen, I think if you're too tall or you're too short, I'm sorry. Like, God made you a mutant. You
Yeah,
can't be president.
yeah, absolutely.
I don't make the rules.
Have you seen the new? There's a new. It's probably one of the worst political ads I've ever seen, and of course, who's it for? It's Ron DeSantis, and it's called "God Created a Warrior." God created
Oh
it.
my God. Post that shit. Post that shit right away.
I've
Yeah, I
had
saw that before. One of the I had to call an ambulance. I was so cringe. Lord.
yeah,
I kind of feel like Ron DeSantis should be allowed to speak as much as he wants
yes,
because
yes.
that dude is
The more he's
everybody's
out, the
president.
better. I mean, it's talk about the definition of a construct.
Look, Trump, for all of Trump's faults, he is actually entertaining and he's actually funny.
Yes,
And I know that we're not supposed to say that. I know we're supposed to just be like, oh, he's racist Hitler, McHitler, whatever. But he has his moments where you're like, oh shit, I can't believe he actually said that. And you laugh because
it,
you're a human being and you live in the real world. I have never done anything but laugh at Ron DeSantis. So it's a very awkward kind of thing, dealing with a Ron DeSantis, situation because it's so boomer tier, it's so ridiculous, and it's kind of just like it's aesthetically offensive that it's hard to know where to begin on it, Tom. It's really
yeah,
hard.
it's very similar to like the since we're talking about Dan Crenshaw, and it's always fun to beat up on him because he's so awful. But like the campaign commercials of him, we're calling in like the Avengers or something, and like jumping out of a plane. Like, do you remember that? I think it was for
Oh
the
yeah,
last
I remember
cycle.
that. And then he, of course, whenever somebody insults another person, right? They're usually being autobiographical.
Yes,
So, you
project
know, yeah,
confession for projection.
yes, and it's like when Peter Thiel calls somebody a sociopath, you're kind of like, interesting choice of words there, Peter. Um, so there's always this like, in in insult autobiography, right? And so when we look at Dan Crenshaw, he called all these people performance artists.
Because
Right? He's
that's
called Matt
exactly
Gaetz a performance artist, and it's like, bro, I saw you jump out of a plane and have like a laser eye. Like I watched that happen. Like I watched, you cosplay as Thor from the Avengers.
except a
Like,
lot shorter.
except a lot shorter and not as Australian or as good looking. Like I'll just
Uh,
be honest. Like, you
or
know,
that time that Matt Gaetz did so much performative stuff, quote unquote, in the all the rounds of electing McCarthy to speakership, that he got so crazy that he punched like one of the walls in
yeah, he
the House
punched a
chambers.
wall and then he lost the ability to be the head of Homeland Security because of his tactics, where he called all the other members of the Republican Party who were against McCarthy as Speaker, he called them all his enemies, right? That was the language that he used. So here's a guy talking about fellow members of Congress who have every right to raise an objection to Speaker McCarthy, who, they have every right to do that, right? That is their right
He's
as.
not there's nothing defensible about him other than sorry, if I think of something I'll come back and
No, I
mention
mean,
it.
there's nothing defensible about like what he's doing. And then, of course, we all kind of know that Kevin McCarthy is going to lose. Like he's going to lose his House majority going into the 2024 cycle. Um, we all kind of know that that's going to happen, right? So it's kind of like it's just a very silly kind of situation. And
He's still looking for the whistleblower for Comer.
yeah, I mean, you have a situation where there's a supposed whistleblower who's like very obviously an Israeli spy to anyone who's been paying attention. And oh, looks, we lost the whistleblower. Wait, what? We lost the informant. What? And it's like it's very obvious what's going on here. And what's going on is there's a kind of like general bullshittery that's affected the Republican Party, and they are delivering malarkey while Joe Biden is delivering actual results. And you could see that in the mashup he did between Donald Trump's performance, at CNN, and the performance of Joe Biden. So yeah, I'm look at a certain point you have to like look at this stuff very dispassionately, and you have to just make a judgment call. So I just don't see it. I don't see any scenario in which Donald Trump like comes back into political power. Hilarious and entertaining though that would be. Like I will be the first person to laugh at that presidency. But it's no laughing matter when he's, platforming the Netanyahu Israelis, when he's doing all the wild shit that he's doing. And I think with Ron DeSantis, we get the same warmed over, silly, ridiculous Likud politics, but none of the charm or fun or humor or daring do of Donald Trump. So it's no thanks. It's a step in
I
the wrong direction.
I posted on the Jumbotron the video Tom was talking about with DeSantis, that ad you asked
Thank you,
for.
sir.
Absolutely.
Caravelt's becoming the new Tom.
Hey,
Indispensable.
I've always appreciated his contributions to the spaces. I got to commend him for that. Seriously,
Yeah,
I
so
it's
appreciate it.
fun.
it's been a very interesting Mother's Day because, naturally what I did the whole day, other than text my mom and wish her a happy Mother's Day, which she did not deserve. I'll just be honest about that. Um, she's a mean mom. Not all moms are good. Let's just be honest about it. We can say that. It's okay. And I unfortunately had a not very good one, but second time around is a good time. But anyway, so I texted my mother and wished her a happy Mother's Day because that's the right thing to do. And then I, of course, discussed the Arab-Israeli Palestinian conflict most of the day because that's just a normal, healthy thing to do on a Sunday. Um, and I didn't.
It's always a very lighthearted debate discussion.
Always
Yeah,
sensible,
I was gonna
calm
say I'm sure it
people
went very well.
who never question your motives. They're always like everyone's very respectful and really like I just don't see why we can't just solve this thing. We should just get into a Twitter space, hash it out, call it a day. No, of course not, right? So the problem, of course, is that we have all these crazy people running around on this issue. And if you are not sufficiently pro-Palestine or sufficiently pro-Israel or sufficiently whatever, in exactly the right way, people freak out. So I'm increasingly of the view that I'm really just I'm pro-justice. And
You know what? I was
justice means not being
sorry.
not being treated as a Palestinian as an American, because clearly that's what they want to do to all of us, right? They want us all eating
Yes.
their slop that they're selling us through their like ridiculous companies, and they want us basically all as Palestinians, and we should just refuse that. We should refuse the frame. And that's, I think, where things are going to go in our country. That's kind of my sense of it. People are sick of this shit. Like when I saw all the stuff about the Israeli flag flying in the Missouri, Capitol or whatever, it's like, come
It's
on, like,
disgusting.
just be fucking serious, like,
Yeah,
it's just ridiculous.
yeah, and what Jeremy was talking about last night, which is very important, was it's not just the stuff that happens at the federal level. You see these entanglements in state, all over the country, in all of our critical infrastructure. One of them being the Carbine 911. And I got to tell you, if there's anybody that you wouldn't want in charge of something like that, I'd say Michael Chertoff would be one of them. That's a
I've
scary
met
guy.
Michael Chertoff. I've met him, and he really is. He does look exactly like Skeletor. You know.
And earlier on in the space, Eric's space, when he was talking about what happened in Ferguson, and then like whoever the person was that said this is definitely a Russian operation, right? And then somebody else comes in. So you start in with the over the top, claim to start moving opinion on social media. And I thought of who was you know, who on the day of 9/11 came out and read chapter and verse that this was definitely Osama bin Laden, and this is radical jihad Islam, and we're going to have to change everything. The world changed today forever, and this is, of course, like uh, maybe like 11 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And who's saying that is Ehud Barak on the BBC. And so, how was that narrative already set up? We need to pull all the countries together so we can
Well,
go all
for me, I just
over.
look at this. I'm a basic bitch, right?
Right.
So what I do is I just look at like what happened, who did it, why did they do it, what's the situation, and when you look at like almost all of the American policies, um, when you look at like all of the American policies are essentially made to harmonize with Israeli policies. Indefinite detention, check. Torture, check.
Yeah.
Preemptive war, check. Like if you just run down the list of all the doctrine that got kind of like subsumed into the U.S. military during this period, it was all basically harmonizing with Israeli interests.
Yeah, because you had gents running the Pentagon at that time.
Yep, yep. And so you had a lot of these, this situation, and you look out into the world and like, what did the Israelis want? What did the Russians want? The Russians wanted us engaged in Iraq. Why? Because doing so would drive up the price of oil, which of course they loved as a petro state, right? It's why all of the petro states are always trying to knock each other over, right? They're always trying to take each other over or sanction each other. And every time you sanction a petro state, you create a black market for oil. It's not like they're like, oh, we're sanctioned, we can't do any oil stuff. No, of course not. They create an illegal market. And who are the group of people who benefit the most from illegal markets, black markets, as it were, right? And so you look out at this, and it's very obvious that there was a whole concerted Israeli effort to sanction the Russians and to have Russia be the scapegoat around the 2016 conflict or the 2016 election. And so what ends up happening is you have all of these Russians working with the Likudniks to help elect Donald Trump. And then they're hoping, right, that they're going to keep the sanctions on Iran. They're hoping that they're going to have some of the sanctions removed from them because they're hearing, Putin is obsolete. They're hearing NATO is obsolete. They're hearing all this other stuff. And of course, what ends up happening? There's a whole cottage industry that's created about how Russia did the 2016 stuff, and then you look at it pretty like dispassionately, and you're like, yeah, they were doing some Facebook ads, they were like trying to cause chaos, whatever. And then you recall that any Russian you talked to during that period thought Hillary Clinton was going to be president, right? So there's just like obvious nonsense going on, and you look at the Israeli efforts to push the Seth Rich story, right? The Seth Rich lie about Seth Rich being a source for Assange. Why would they do such a thing? Could it be because they were the source for a lot of the material that went to Assange, as Assange told me? And could that have been why they were hacking me and fucking with me after I went to go visit Assange? You know?
Oh, they wouldn't do that, Charles.
I mean, it's
Oh,
just
they
so
did?
ridiculous. And then you look at like Alana Goodman of the Washington Free Beacon, who was at the Daily Mail, who pushed a lot of this stuff about there being another channel for the information, who, by the way, lived in Israel for a spell, right? You look at like who's the editress of the Washington Free Beacon? That would be, Eliana Johnson. Who's she? She's the daughter of Scott Johnson. Who's he? He's the guy who runs the Powerline blog, which did all the anti-Ilhan Omar stuff and which has pushed all this other like Likudnik propaganda. And he's of course the one pictured in that famous picture of Netanyahu with all those bloggers. So yeah, it's a pretty kind of crazy, cringe kind of thing. Um, and yeah, we're in this environment now where we're just not putting up with this shit anymore. And it seems to me that what Joe Biden is doing is he's trying to reduce American dependency on all kinds of countries. So, or all kinds of entities. So he's pushing the Inflation Reduction Act, which essentially makes it so that diabetics and others don't get fucked by basically, being gouged and being dependent on higher and higher prices for diabetes meds, which you have to wonder like a lot of us are becoming diabetic, and it's like we're told it's because we don't work out enough or because it's this, that, and the other thing. Could it be because of the food that we are all forced to eat and all the weird consolidation in the food industry and all the lack of regulation and all the removal of microplastics, which doesn't occur in the United States, but occurs in pretty much all of the other OECD countries? Could it be that there's all this other stuff going on for why we're getting diabetes? And then, of course, you look at the Israeli history of recruiting people who are diabetic to act as part of their intelligence operations because they're desperate and they need medicine to keep themselves alive. And then you look at what does Joe Biden do? He shows up and he caps what that drug companies can charge. It's pretty powerful stuff. And the Republicans have no answer for that other than like my freedom or whatever, right? It's absurd.
Mike Lindell's going to start selling a diabetic My Boot.
Yeah. No, but you know what I mean? Like there's a level here.
Yes.
And then you look at like Joe Biden shows up, like where are we very dependent on? We're very dependent on the price of oil and the fact that all these like petrostates, want to fuck with us. So what does Joe Biden do? He shows up and he, pushes all this money into renewable energy, and it's starting to have all this effect. And what do the Texas Republicans do, who are all owned by the oil lobby? They start pushing anti-renewable energy policies, even though Texas is becoming one of the fastest growing solar producers in the country.
Yeah,
so
and
you
they're
really
also
start to wonder. You start to like look at this shit, and you're like, what side are the Republicans like really on? And the answer becomes pretty clear if you look at it like just dispassionately, which is they're not on our side.
no.
And it's I don't know if you watched President Biden's speech before before Howard University. I think it was one of his best speeches actually. It was pretty good. I don't know if you saw it, Tom.
I saw a couple of clips, and what I saw, I like the message. I like a message that's positive, that has a vision, that is not just this reactionary bullshit. This is where woke goes to die. It's so. I mean, it's so like. I don't know. I don't want to give it any more air, but there is nothing there. And one of the things I'll agree with that I thought was probably one of the most truthful things Steve Bannon I ever heard him say in an interview was when when it came time for like the health care bill in like 2017. He goes, these guys, Republicans, they're not ready to govern. They don't know how to govern. All they know how to do is run against something. That's it. Because when we had all of the chambers, House, Senate, or the House, the Senate, and obviously the White House, there was nothing that got done except tax breaks. That's it. That's all they know how to do.
Well, my friend, Terry always says that the Republican Party went from being un-American to anti-American.
Yeah, I'd agree with
And
that.
I think that frame is a good way of thinking about it. And yeah, I mean, look, we're seeing this situation go on right now, and yeah, it's.
Actually, Ron DeSantis summed it up very well that time you met him. You ought to share that little anecdote
Oh
with him.
yeah, he said it's better when the Jews run things. That's what he told me when we were, in the Trump Hotel, and it was one of those situations where I was like, "Wait, what? Did he actually just say that to me?" But yeah, Amanda Milius introduced me to him. I had met him before. I didn't know him as well, but I was sort of introduced in the quote unquote the right way. And he is the one who actually convinced Congressman Matt Gaetz to give me a ticket to the State of the Union because he was hoping that I would get Peter Thiel to support his bid for Florida governorship. So make of that what you will.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The other part, another thing that is not widely talked about. Well, you see all of the trips he makes to Israel to sign legislation for the state of Florida that's anti.
Which like, let's just note like how weird that is.
Yeah,
You know?
and how he's making all of his travel records of his multiple planes that he has now secret.
Yeah, totally
Because
normal stuff.
that's where woke goes to die. And then who was over lobbying for getting the embassy moved to Jerusalem, fucking like to the right of Trump when Trump first gets into office? It's Meatball Ron. Why would he be doing that? And he's like a
Well, then you have
nobody.
the issue of
He's a,
his buddy Kent Sturman, who
yeah,
is the running that fraudulent veterans, you know, a company that's helping veterans move people. It's like a moving company for veterans, right? And there's all these issues of him like failing to deliver on contracts, and then he forcibly holds down his babysitter and threatens to rape her. And then there's like a whole situation there that develops, and he ends up maybe killing himself, maybe being killed. Very unclear what actually happened with Mr. Sturman. And this is a guy who was the governor's best friend, who was his landlord, right? There was all these relationships there, and you don't hear a fucking word about it in our like compromised media.
none, nothing. Just like you hear nothing about what's you know. Think about if you're okay. So like you talked in the last space about think of things in different frames. So put it in a frame of if there was people in the streets, hundreds of thousands or millions of Americans every week for 18 straight weeks, and you had the leader of your number one ally come over and just bootlick the current person that you're protesting, like that would be pretty demoralizing, I would think.
Well,
uh,
it's
Kevin
so
McCarthy.
obvious what's going on in Israel right now, too, which is he doesn't want protests. Netanyahu doesn't want protests on the street, right?
Bad optics, bro.
Yeah, he doesn't want that for the anniversary of the state of Israel. So he goes and he attacks the Palestinians, and the Palestinians supply a whole bunch of like bullshit, fake homemade rockets, and that solves that problem, right? It becomes a wag the dog kind of thing,
Yes,
rather than a real, situation, a real discussion there. So yeah, it's a going concern. Absolutely.
I would say a bright spot, at least in our politics, is AOC and Gates getting together to do something bipartisan. That's actually it's good to see that, and I think that he can help at least lead and help better decisions get made by taking that role. He can be helpful.
Gates and I are friends. It's no secret about that. But I keep waiting for him to like show the fuck up, And like this is a good start, but it's
When he gets
so
into
interesting how
yeah,
weak all the leadership is on the Republican side, you know.
yeah, they're like what Eric was describing the Missouri legislature. Like they're actually really there really isn't one. They have people that write bills for them, and then they shove them through at the very end of a legislative session where there's like no debate, no nothing, and that's exactly how most of our politics work. It's fake.
Yeah, it's very performative, very fake. Everyone's kind of waiting for something to happen, and It's interesting, yeah. Like, I mean, so Joe Biden has this vision for how he thinks the U.S. should go, and he's just like methodically executing upon it. And I was saying this to another friend the other day. It's like he has been running for president my entire life, and I am at 34 years old. He has been like thinking of himself as a president, and so here he is, like actually president in the real world, the one we all live in. And what is he doing? He's wasting no time doing all the things he's always wanted to do. And it's pretty impressive to watch somebody who is just kind of executing upon an agenda. And I think there's a lot of people out there who it may not necessarily be their agenda, it may not necessarily be something that they agree with, but they're noticing like the new factories being in their town. They're noticing all of this like this real shit going on, and it's very hard not to give Biden his due. And what the Republicans have is like they literally have nothing. They have like, oh, the trannies, right? And it's like, really? Like this is how you're gonna do it? It's just not impressive. You know what I mean?
No, it's it's honestly, it's like it's embarrassing. It's just it's so degraded. Uh, I'm glad I really don't watch any of it anymore. you know, so
Well, hold on. I thought that DeSantis got a blessing from the Wailing Wall, and that's why he's the best governor of all time. Is it?
no, it's true. That did help him with the weather. He said
With the hurricane, yeah. Even though like 4 or 5 people died, I guess Yahweh didn't get the message on that
There
one.
was technical difficulties. Might have been a Tuesday.
Can you
That's
imagine,
right.
like, I mean, this is not no laughing matter, but it is kind of hilarious to think about it. Like, can you imagine being like a family member of one of those 4 or 5 people that died during the hurricane that he said that he got rid of by praying at the Western Wall? Can you imagine like being one of those family members and being like, "Well, you should have prayed harder, motherfucker." You know what I mean? Like, it's just like I don't
Yeah,
know. It's
as
just
he's out, in a fake, unannounced presidential campaign while they were going through like another one. The flooding that they were going through. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, he needs to. It's
oh,
really
whatever.
just an excuse he has to go constantly to the Western Wall.
Yeah, exactly. That's why they got the other jet.
I mean, it's so ridiculous on so many levels.
Charles, what the title of the space? What do we know about Twitter's new CEO? So, what do we know about the Twitter's new CEO?
Oh, so we know that her father was a kind of like corrupt cop from Long Island who shot an unarmed man in 1962. I'll throw it up on the jumbotron. Let me just talk amongst yourselves, and I'll throw it up top. But basically, she comes from NBC Universal. NBC Universal is extremely sus organization, and she's a Italian American. Or Meatball American, as we know them, thanks to Meatball Ron. And she's got a long history here of kind of involvement with the Chinese, which of course have a lot of interest through NBC Universal. And she's supposed to be the ad whisperer. She's supposed to allay the ad markets. That's kind of what's going on there. Connections with the ADL, naturally, and of course connections with a number of other kind of like girl boss kind of businesses and all the rest of it. But for me, what I find interesting about her is the father, right? So the father, Robert Yacarino, was a police officer for quite a number of years, and he was based in Long Island, or Long Island. I don't know how I can never say it correctly as the locals do. And he was involved in surveillance activity. He was involved in all kinds of stuff against the Gambino mob, the mob family, Italian American family, always up to good stuff. The Gambinos. And he, of course, also ran a police in Nassau. He ran a police training academy. So I'm reading the New York Times article right now, and I'll put it up in the jumbotron. But here he is being interviewed, Robert P. Yacarino, and this is a New York Times article. Police in Nassau teach foreigners. By the way, so there's a general rule that I use now whenever there's like a major political figure or a major figure generally. So we know this is another frame I use. This is a genealogical frame. And the way it kind of works is I always ask people, like, all right, what did your dad do? What did your mom do? Like if their mom is, working out there in the world. And it's amazing how many people don't know what their family members did for work. So that's like really weird. That's a very American thing, I think. Then I always ask them, what did your grandfathers do? Right. And you can kind of get a sense of like who they are, right, based upon what their grandfathers did, along with their parents. And that's because a lot of traits in families are obviously heritable. Your behavior, your intelligence, your personality, these are all very heritable things. And so politics, I think, is like 70% heritable. So you get a real impression of the world just by doing that kind of analysis. And that's kind of why I favor it. So whenever there's a major figure out there, I just kind of look into like who their family is, right? And it's because a lot of people, they're very controlled, they're very manicured in their way, particularly when they have one of these, political jobs. Now, that's not to say it's perfect, right? We all know people who rebel from their families for one reason or another. We all know people who take on different positions from their family. We all know, like, that's a sort of like, that's a sort of interesting history here. Now, of course, for those who are not familiar, Nassau is the main county that George Santos represents. And the other main Nassau rep is Desposito, who's a former law enforcement, a former detective. So if you've ever been to Long Island, you kind of know that they're basically all cops and crooks, and sometimes it's hard to tell which is which. That's just kind of how it works on Long Island. Now, for me, what's interesting about this, so the Nassau police in Nassau teach foreigners, New York Times, Special to the Times, November 22nd, 1985. And for those who also don't know, I like to use the papers of the oppressor. So I like to read the Likud press, like the New York Times. And I like to read it because you kind of have to read it like with Talmudic attention to detail to kind of figure out what the hell's actually going on. So here we go. Remember, 1985. Okay, so that's Reagan years, baby. Okay, that's what we're up to. For the past 2 weeks, a dozen high-ranking Ecuadorian police officials and several members of the Costa Rican Police Department have been undergoing anti-terrorist training given to them by the Nassau County Police Department. Okay, that's kind of weird. Let's read on. Under the program, organized and paid for by the State Department, police officials from a number of countries have been receiving such training from the Nassau Police and 5 other departments, including New York City's. Okay? We've got this guy, Michael Kraft, coordinator for public and congressional affairs. The program is a reflection that terrorism has become a worldwide problem. It is the most comprehensive program we know of, which involves countries from all corners of the earth. Remember, Nassau County, okay? Very strange. For county police officers here, the program is little more than an extension of the training they give their own personnel. That's weird. But Nassau police officials said that for many third world countries, it was a sophisticated and innovative way to control terrorism and people who hold hostages. The 2-week course includes training in hostage negotiations, the use of firearms and surveillance equipment, responses to bomb threats, evasive automobile driving maneuvers, intelligence gathering, and protection of leaders, according to the commanding officer of the county's police academy, Robert P. Yacarino. That's our boy. The controlled use of assaults. The major philosophy of the training is to show that the use of assault tactics must be a controlled use, coupled with pre-programming and other possibilities such as negotiation. And of course, what they're talking about here is the reason this is all happening is that there was a quote-unquote guerrilla leftist guerrilla takeover, not guerrilla like monkey style, but guerrilla as in guerrilla, group in which nearly 100 people were killed. So Yacarino referred to the takeover in Colombia earlier this month of the Supreme Court building by a guerrilla group in which nearly 100 people were killed when the government used the military to recapture the building. So the question here about this sort of police training going on is obviously we've seen other police training. We see the role that the Israelis do when they do police training of our police, in a post 9/11 period. But there's all kinds of things that go on in these kind of trainings. So that's sort of something that I found quite interesting. And it goes into some detail about basically all the weird money that was approved that went directly to Nassau County. And it's it's a pretty interesting article. And I think it's sort of useful to kind of look at this in a serious way. Now, let's see here. The other piece I wanted to highlight for our attention and for our purposes is I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that he shot an unarmed man in 1962. Now, for those who are unfamiliar, I've shared some of this stuff already on my Twitter, but I think it's very useful, and it's a very interesting kind of history here. But let's see here. Let's see. Hold up. Let me post it real quick. Just give me a second. I think we need to consider, though, that this is another one of those compromised people that Elon Musk is so familiar with hiring. As you well know, Andy McCabe's son, Andy McCabe, director of the FBI, his son is the FBI's liaison for SpaceX, which is, I think, a key detail. Okay, a very important detail with why there haven't been more efforts to roll back some of SpaceX and Elon's kind of dangerous activity that he's been engaged with over the years. Yeah, I think we've talked about this before, right, Tom? Like we've gone into some detail on this stuff. I always forget if I'm already repeating myself.
No, this is good. And by the way, if you're requesting to speak and we look at your timeline and the first thing is a picture of, the lower middle part of a guy, no thanks. So
yeah, I mean that's perfectly fine. Wish you lots of luck in that. Okay, now here's the other interesting stuff about her. I posted this the other day. I'm posting this up in the Jumbotron. Where's the stuff about her shooting somebody? Remember, like we're in a macro environment right now where interest rates are rising. So when interest rates are rising, what typically happens is that people don't consume as much. And if they don't consume as much, firms don't advertise as much to get market share, right? That's typically something you see. Lower interest rates, people consume more. Okay? Now, for our purposes, why this is interesting is when we think about these issues in a more serious way, we raise the question about whether or not it's even possible in this macroeconomic environment to bring back all the advertisers to Twitter, right? Is that even possible? Is it even desirable, right? So here's what we have here. So this story, and I brought it up the other day. So here's the Newsday Nassau edition, January 15th, 1962. Monday, page 28. Man shot by a Long Island cop still on danger list. Now, I couldn't find out if this guy had actually died or what. But Grand City Park, a 28-year-old Manhattan man shot by a patrolman during a desperate backyard scuffle over the weekend was still clinging to life early today. But he remained too weak to tell why he chose to start the apparently pointless fight. Guess they had different journalistic standards back in the day. The man, Edgar H. Anderson, whose address was given as 183 West 90th Street, was shot in the right side of his chest early Saturday by Nassau police patrolman Robert Yacarino after he attacked the patrolman with a car spring and attempted to choke him, police said. I don't even know how you do that, but okay. Anderson was taken to a Meadowbrook hospital where he was on the danger list, but in a slightly improved condition. He originally was in critical condition. Anderson was charged yesterday with second-degree assault. Police said he was a passenger in a car which struck a police car operated by Nassau patrolman Salvatore Mandra near 5th Street at about 6:30 Saturday. When Mandra approached the vehicle, police said, Anderson leapt out and fled. Yacarino, on foot patrol in the area, spotted the fleeing man and gave chase. Yacarino finally cornered him in the yard of the Nassau Auto Spring Company at 2441 Jericho Turnpike. Anderson, police said, picked up this car spring, and the policeman pulled out his gun and fired. Police said the wounded man apparently had no criminal record. Anderson's companion, William M. Clark, 25, who gave his address, blah, 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 in Brooklyn, gave no reason for the wounded man's actions. Clark was charged with reckless driving. His arraignment, blah, 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 blah. So that's kind of interesting. And it's particularly interesting when you think about all the police shootings we have now and the role of police shootings in our discourse, right? How will Linda Yaccarino be about policing commentary on these kind of police scuffles? How will she respond? After all, she has a father who shot a man. Similarly, Elon Musk, who's from South Africa, as they say it. Elon Musk, of course, has a father, Errol Musk, who I'm friendly with and have talked to in the past. And Errol Musk also shot a man, actually several men who were breaking into his home. So there's this sort of history here of violence. Yes, Errol Musk's father, Errol, recounts killing 3 home invaders in wild shootout. You thought you were badass, right? He has people break into his house, guns them down. Yikes. Now, I guess what I would just say about this generally is it seems to me that what's going on is we have the kind of compromised bits of our system. And the compromised bits of our system are very much the tech ecosystem. And that, if you are the kind of person who is getting into business with Elon Musk right now, right when the investigations are going on into the self-driving car fiasco that's killing people on our streets, which of course Lex Fridman's involved in. Lex Fridman, of course, very close to Israeli and Likud intelligence. We've sort of talked about that before. I've written about Lex Fridman and his connections to the Israelis on my Substack, which, by the way, all of the research about the involvement of the Israelis in all that effort was curiously omitted from the Business Insider story, which is very interesting indeed when you consider that Business Insider is owned by Axel Springer, which is in turn owned by KKR. And Axel Springer has a policy whereby you're not allowed to be critical of Israel when you work there at the Axel Springer property. So just something to think about, something to kind of mull and sort of chin stroke on.
Isn't that like every company in America, though, not just Axel Springer?
No, Axel Springer is in fact directly talks about that, and I've written about Axel Springer too. Axel Springer's head, the guy whose name escapes me right now. I'm looking right at him. He's a very tall German guy. He's of course the guy who texts with Elon Musk all the time, and I'll put that up in the Jumbotron too, so we have it. But yeah, very interesting stuff. Anywho, does anyone else want to speak? I know we have Richard in here. We have some other friends in here. You're all welcome to come up. So I wrote this piece a while back about Matthias Döpfner. And Matthias Döpfner is the head of Axel Springer. And he's a very kind of controversial figure. Let's not forget also Axel Springer also had on its board Karp and Alex Karp. And Alex Karp, of course, is the founder of Anduril, along with Peter Thiel. So very interesting kind of history here.
Charles, do you feel like there's going to be more of these type of operations where there's going to be more of some crazy stuff activated, I guess is what I'll say, where they're going to try to create as much craziness as possible, whether that be a shooting or just everything as controversial as possible to divide everybody and polarize the conversation even worse than it typically already is.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we absolutely are going to see a lot of desperate countries get increasingly desperate as time goes on. There's really no escaping it now because, what is that old line, les jeux sont faits, right, from Southwood, right? Like the die is cast, right? So there's lots of macroeconomic implications of the US and China increasingly breaking up. And that's going to be something that we're going to have to contend with as time goes on.
And then I think too of what kind of scams and tricks will be pulled on Biden, because he's not gonna, he's doing things that are pro-American. He doesn't, you know, the stuff that's going on over in Israel. And I was thinking about back to like when Bill Clinton got impeached, and everybody thinks it's because of Monica Lewinsky, but in my opinion, that was kind of an op. And it's well documented, but the real reason was he wouldn't go to war in Iraq and wouldn't get as crazy as Netanyahu
Yeah,
and
there's
his.
apparently video of this. I haven't seen this video, but I've heard this from enough people that there was video that they saw during this period. And like a lot of the video from that time period, it isn't, digitized, isn't audio, isn't whatever. There's apparently a lot of video that basically shows rather dispositively that uh, that Bill Clinton was saying, "I'm not going to be blackmailed by the Israelis." Basically, I'm not going to be blackmailed by a hostile foreign power. That was the phrase he used. And of course, one of the last things that Bill Clinton ever did was he pardoned Mark Rich, the guy that was hated by the Likud types, who was probably an Israeli, certainly a British spy. And I've written about Mark Rich too, as a Jewish American who was hounded by, James Comey and Rudy Giuliani.
Hey, what's really strange when you look back at these things retrospectively is, I've heard over the years, Mark Rich was this evil person and really bad guy that, Bill Clinton pardoned, right? However, have you heard anything negative about all of Trump's pardons and all the criminals that he pardoned? No, you don't hear anything talked about on that. It's just really interesting when you understand these things a little bit better.
Right. Well, for me, I always knew that the Likud people really hated him. And how did I know that? Well, because they were obsessed with criticizing Clinton for having pardoned him. So I was always of the view that he must be a good guy. And time and experience of people I know who are kind of like a stone's throw away from him in different ways. The tell that I have is that actually, yeah, he was kind of a good guy. He was kind of useful to the U.S. and British intelligence. So it kind of speaks for itself. I wrote about him and the kind of biography of him earlier because I think people should see that and kind of get a sense for it.
Yeah, and I think too, it's there's not necessarily a good or bad in this world that we look at. It's it's complicated, and there's a lot of gray area, and would you just have to spend time to research exactly what was.
Well, I mean, my view generally has been that we need to stop talking about these things in terms of ideological or red blue, left right nonsense, and we need to be talking a lot more about them in terms of networks, in terms of people belonging to networks, in terms of like what are people actually doing, what are the national interests of the countries or forces behind them, and kind of going from it accordingly. Welcome, Richard. I see Brian's here. Mike's here. Welcome, welcome.
Brian had his hand up.
Go ahead, Brian. We don't really know you, but we'll see if you're a good
Charles,
guy.
how are you?
It'll be fun.
Hey,
We'll have Richard speak first. That's all right, Brian.
Sure. Yeah, I don't have any huge hot takes on the new Twitter CEO. How do you pronounce her name again? Takiamura?
Yacarino.
Yaccarino. Okay.
Linda Yaccarino.
That Yaccarino. That is interesting. Yaccarino. That is interesting that her father was a police officer. I don't know if I want to make too much of that anecdote that you researched. I mean, policing was different back in the day, to say the least. So, I don't know, it's interesting tidbit. She does strike me as an almost like just listening to her speak and these conferences and things. She strikes me as an almost like walking parody of corporate speak and corporate people talking about branding and synergy and all this. It was just all these just weird buzzwords that I was hearing. I couldn't imagine like having a conversation with her. I'm sure my eyes would start rolling immediately, and I'd leave as soon as I could. That being said,
That's
to
the
be
strategy,
fair,
by the way. They make you epileptic that way. Your eyes roll back into your head, and then they take your money. That's their new strategy at Twitter.
they just beat you into submission with corporate speak, basically. But the little that I know of her, she did a good job, like with NBC Universal, whatever, getting ads, and who knows? Maybe she's good at making sales. I don't know. Like, I think so long as Elon is in charge, in terms of getting all of these big, corporations to come back to Twitter, I think the horse has left the barn. I mean, one thing that I've noticed on just my own Twitter feed is that I'll see a lot of kind of low rent ads, apparently, like ads for again, maybe it's just me and it's catered to me or whatever, but I'll see these like kind of goofy $20 toy
It's not
ads or
just you. They're
t-shirts
all
or
like,
ads for this like conservative competitor to Amazon.com or something where you can go support patriots, or I don't, it doesn't seem like they're going to really get these big corporate sponsors. And as you're saying, higher interest rate environment, maybe that has, again, that horse has left the barn. Elon's not going anywhere. He's still going to be the presence that he's been for the past year on Twitter. He's not changing. So I don't know what's going on. It does seem like there's some kind of, I don't know. I mean, I don't, because it's all speculation, and I hate to do that. Maybe she's in there to tame Elon a bit. Maybe she's in there to please ad sellers, like big corporation. Let's sell movies, let's sell the Gap clothing, let's sell Apple products or whatever. Maybe, and she certainly has experience of that. Maybe that's what she's there for. I mean, I think Elon, should kind of go all in with his business plan. I mean, I'm not a fan of Tucker Carlson, but I would say that the notion of him doing a newsy show that is Twitter native or Twitter exclusive, and maybe get some subs that way, maybe certainly just getting a lot of views. I do think that that's probably a pretty good idea on Twitter. I do think that if Twitter is branded in any way, it's kind of like the news place where you should go when news is happening. And so I think Elon should, probably double down onto that. But again, I don't know how this is going to, make his money back. Maybe that's not even the.
I have a different theory about it.
Maybe that's not even the agenda. And,
yeah,
again, just to reiterate, I think Twitter's brand has already been rendered toxic among these major corporations already. So, Yaka Mero, or whatever her name is going to be frustrated.
Yeah, I have a different theory about it.
Just some thoughts.
My theory about it, for what it's worth, is that basically Sheryl Sandberg was the one who was the Likud cutout at Facebook, and that Facebook was the kind of Chinese Israeli platform. And you could see that with like Deborah Liu, who's at Ancestry now, who's the one who ran Facebook Marketplaces, where all the stuff would get stolen and then resold to people on Facebook Marketplaces. It was kind of her innovation. And she's now at Ancestry.com, which is owned by Blackstone. And so, yeah, there's a kind of like game that took place here. And the kind of game that took place is which is going to be the influence operation of the Chinese or of other players on American life. And so my sense is that Twitter is replacing Facebook as that vehicle. There's a lot of regulations that have kind of come into place on Facebook. And that's sort of not the case with Twitter. So that's kind of what's really going on here, would be my sort of assessment of it, is that there's a sort of fight over which platform it belongs to which country. And so when you kick out a Sheryl Sandberg and you install a Nick Clegg at Facebook, obviously the Chinese want a new influence engine, or the Likud factions want a new influence engine. And it seems to me that the one that they've chosen has been Twitter. Rumble kind of doesn't quite get it done. YouTube, of course, is like increasingly controlled by the U.S. government, or sort of factions around the U.S. government, and so that's really what's driving a lot of this. If that makes sense, that's kind of my general read on it. Now,
Hey,
Yaccarino was at
real quick.
NBC Universal. NBC
Yeah.
Universal lost $100 million on BuzzFeed. There's a lot of connections that NBC Universal has with the Chinese and with other players. And NBC News very much pushes MSNBC, all that stuff kind of pushes a very Chinese agenda on a lot of the news and a kind of Chinese frame, which is partly because of their parent company's relationships in China. That's sort of my frame on it for what it's worth. Let's go to Brian real quick.
Yeah, real quick, Richard should definitely watch the Ron DeSantis video that we put up in the Jumbotron.
Oh, good.
He'll love it.
By the way, was I just speaking into the void about 3 minutes ago?
No, we could hear you.
Oh.
We could hear you. You just couldn't hear us.
That's so weird that happens. I think just the wires are getting crossed. I had to leave and come back. Interesting.
Yeah, I've had that happen a few times. I mean, obviously they're not investing money on fixing this thing.
Yeah, there's a ton of bugs in Twitter Spaces. I mean, he's focusing on different features right now. They're rolling out video chat to Spaces and everything. I think about the time that all that stuff rolls out is probably going to be when they start focusing on bug fixes. I'd give it another 2 months because my entire time I've been on Spaces, the past 6 months or so, I've noticed that there's a huge amount of bugs with them. But I mean, I think that's not priority for them right now.
Do we really need video chat? I mean, I don't know.
No, we don't.
No, we don't. But I think he's trying to turn it into more. Into what Twitter does, essentially. That's the idea behind it.
Yeah, I don't think we need it. Just to be blunt with you, I think the pivot to video is kind of bullshit and didn't work for Facebook and won't work here either.
He'll do the equivalent of the GOP who lost their whistleblower. So it won't happen probably.
There's a lot of it's very computationally expensive to have a lot of video on your platform.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's a whole bunch of more back end that it requires and all sorts of.
Yeah. So where's he going to get the money to do that?
Well, I mean, he sells the check marks every month. I mean, that's a pretty.
Yeah, but look at the numbers of check marks. Look at the numbers of check marks, and let's not. I mean, he took a shitload of debt on to buy this company at a time when interest rates were relatively low, and now they've just gotten higher and higher and higher.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
I mean, I'm just a basic bitch person who just can understand how companies work, and he clearly is getting a lot of money from the Chinese and the Saudis and others. And then obviously we saw what happened with Turkey, where he's suspending all these Turkish accounts on behalf of Erdogan. And of course, Turkey is launching a satellite on, Elon Musk's platform. So it kind of speaks for itself. But let's go to Brian real quick. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thank you so much for the mic and hearing me a minute. A little bit concerned that you might not let me finish getting through this, but I ask that you would hear me patiently, being very fruitful with my speech here, try and keep a mic a minute. This person we're talking about, I've read a couple of articles, and I pulled a couple of articles that I'm looking at concerning not just her, but a few of her colleagues also that I'm very, very alarmed about. I beg of you to also look at it, maybe if you can find them. They shouldn't be hard to find, but I read an article concerning the S&P 500, the dive that it took, and she's head chairman of the global advertising, not just here in the United States. Of course, let's talk about not just her moral principle as a person when she leaves her home, that stays at home, right? So her job is principle. She's dictated by that. And she's very, very, very capable at her job. So this is a Google research, not research, just a Google search result right here. Talk, Linda, Wikipedia, Linda, her name. This article is of interest to the following wiki projects. Wiki project women rated start class. This article is within the scope of Wiki Projects Women, a collaborative effort to improve the coverage of women on Wikipedia. You mentioned the name, Mattis. The colleagues of such. There's an article produced.
We need you to get to the point, Brian.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. The Dewey Decimal System, the colleges. That person, Mattis. There's an article right here. It's very alarming to me. Where are the books that reflect them? The article said this is his words. The companies that represent him. The article was cited by the peer review board, which is very important. And this person, I of course would suggest you look at the Mattis system. My colleagues and I put together.
Yeah, no. Have to get to the point. Yeah, sorry, but like time is precious. Chop chop.
Charles, has there been any more reporting on AI within Twitter? Because Elon has made some of his typically vague comments about oh, I was involved with OpenAI, but then I left, and OpenAI is woke and it's dangerous and blah blah blah. And then there was also a report, I believe it was in like Fortune or Forbes, and it was that he was buying servers and developing some kind of AI. And what I was speculating on, and I guess we were talking about this like 3 weeks ago or maybe longer, is that AI starts to operate on the level of the platform. And that's something that is very concerning. I mean, you no longer need a tweet farm. You no longer need an IRA. You no longer need a legion of mindless fans. You can almost use AI to direct the discourse on the platform itself.
Yeah, I mean, look, I just don't think the OpenAI stuff is going to be allowed to happen in quite the way the Chinese and the Israelis and the Chinese Israelis want it to happen. I think the British and American intelligence services have an eye on it, and I think there's going to be a lot more restrictions around it. Certainly, I've had a lot of conversations with people at the National Security Council, and I basically made the case that like OpenAI should be banned. It's computationally very expensive. It requires a lot of resources. It's not clear to me that the amount of compute relative to the objective actually makes life better. And it seems to me that what's happening is that it's another use for NVIDIA chips rather than cryptocurrency, which is being shut down by the government. So it's kind of interesting how fast people mutated from being pro crypto to being pro AI. That to me is kind of the tell.
Oh, so you're suggesting that it's an excuse for buying NVIDIA chips. That's interesting.
Yeah, no, and I think the evidence kind of supports that, by the way, for what it's worth. And I've had a lot of conversations with people about that. And of course, OpenAI, is backed by Microsoft. Microsoft is looking for new uses for all of its machines because Microsoft can't guarantee the security of its Azure cloud, given all the Israeli and Chinese developers who put holes in it. And our friend Jeremy, who's here, who can't speak because he's with his beloved, but Jeremy has done a lot of very good work on the JEDI contract and all of the ways in which the JEDI contract, which was an effort to take a lot of our sensitive data from the military and put it in Amazon or Microsoft, the ways in which the JEDI contract was very penetrated by the Israelis and by the Chinese. And so I think they abolished the contract altogether. Isn't that right, Tom? They sort of like reduced it or whatever.
Yeah, I believe so. Jeremy can give me a thumbs up or thumbs down if I'm right on that, but I'm pretty sure that was the case.
Yeah, I think that's right. And so my understanding of it is basically we've talked about this before, how there are like 5 major kingdoms, right? Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, Microsoft, and each of them have varying degrees of close relationship with the US and British deep states. And I think what's happening is that OpenAI is a kind of excuse for Microsoft. Microsoft couldn't buy the Activision $69 billion deal. And so now they're looking for places they can go to and grow into, but they can't really get there right now. And so they're looking at the AI thing as a vehicle for the growth of their stock.
Hey, Charles.
Welcome, Mike.
Hi. I just had a quick remark. Start with Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s recent podcast with Russell Brand and others, referencing his purported CIA assassination of his uncle. And I know it's opened a lot of people's eyes, but anybody with
so I don't believe that, just for what it's worth. I've actually had a conversation with Robert Kennedy where we talked about the Israeli and Russian role in assassinating his family members. And so I actually don't believe he actually believes that, for what it's worth.
Well, anybody who's looked into it can come away with a pretty firm sense that that actually happened. But
the Israelis and the Russians were involved with it. Yes, I agree.
Perhaps, but it was not.
Sorry, don't have time for the kind of CIA did the Kennedy assassination thing. Not interested.
No, that was based on he did not want nuclear proliferation, and Israel.
I mean, look, I've literally had conversations with Robert Kennedy about this very topic, and he admitted to me then, this was like 4 years ago, that, and by the way, I know a lot of the Kennedy family, right? None of them are backing Robert Kennedy in this bid. Caroline Kennedy is ambassador to Australia. I have companies that operate in Australia. I went to school with Rory Kennedy, at prep school, that is. We were friends, so there's this kind of like Robert Kennedy bullshit that's being promoted. And I think it's being promoted as a way of like trying to challenge Biden somehow. And I just don't really have any patience for it because I don't see any evidence for it. And what's more, I think that he can be correct about the problems going on when it comes to the vaccine industry, which is certainly something I share his criticisms of. But I think that running for president and putting a kind of like pro-Russia spin on things, it's just not true. Like, we posted earlier the whole curious detail about Jack Ruby.
I'll throw that up in the Jumbotron.
Yeah, put that up in the Jumbotron because people need to see this. And of course, we never talk about the role of like Mexico in the in the assassination, nor do we talk about the role of Russia in the assassination. And certainly there were a lot of CIA officers present that day in Dallas, as one would expect, because the CIA in those days operated within the United States and still does to some extent, certainly for Natural Resources Division, which is, largely, it's a very large group of people that still operate within the U.S. So, yeah, I mean, Tom, do you want to read that to people and explain the significance of that article? Because I think people should really kind of understand it.
Yeah, let me read it real quick. So this is dated November 30th, 1963. So this is 8 days after the assassination, right? And it's titled Jack Rubenstein Once Promoted Tan Entertainer. Jack Ruby, the 52-year-old Dallas nightclub impresario who shot to death the man charged with assassinating President Kennedy on the eve of the chief executive's funeral, once promoted a 12-year-old black boy talent discovery known as Sugar Daddy in stage performances here. It was disclosed Ruby brought the boy, whose real name was not immediately disclosed, here from Dallas, where he had quote unquote discovered him, and booked him in several acts. Later, he took Sugar Daddy to New York, but reportedly had difficulty finding bookings for him there. A picture of Sugar Daddy and Ruby is a song and dance art here in 1957 was released by the impresario's turned Slayer's brother, Hyman Rubenstein, Rubenstein is Ruby's real surname. As Ruby's prestige sang, the boy sang, danced, and played piano. Ruby reportedly went to great lengths to promote Sugar Daddy here and resented any criticism of the boy. He once became raving mad. Persons who knew him here, when some of Ruby's friends taunted him about it. So what do you get from that, Charles?
Well, I mean, clearly he's part of some organized crime world, right? The human trafficking, sex trafficking, minstrel shows. And I believe Jack Ruby was actually quoted saying that he killed Kennedy. Actually, I mean, he killed Lee Harvey Oswald because, basically he wanted to ingratiate himself with the Jews. And there was a really great article a while back. There was a really great article that was done. I want to say it was like in the Jewish Chronicle, Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle, which a friend of mine sent to me about kind of the efforts to kind of like free Lee Harvey Oswald from, free Jack Ruby from being convicted of the killing of our friend Lee Harvey Oswald. And let me just share that real quick. Now, we should talk about, Rise and Kill First, the book about Israeli assassination programs. There's quite a lot of evidence pointing in the direction of Kennedy being killed by a kind of Russian, Israeli mob, Mexican kind of hit. And that basically the U.S. government, rather than get into a major war over the issue, essentially decided to look the other way on the Kennedy assassination. And I think that's really like the real story of the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah, I agree with that. A great book to read. It's an unbelievable book. It's called Final Judgment by Michael Collins Piper, and he lays out that's the thesis. Israel was determined to get nuclear weapons. Kennedy was adamant about proliferation of nuclear arms around the world. They had the little reactor in Dimona, I believe, already that was supposed to be just a research reactor. And Kennedy told them no on several occasions to Ben-Gurion. About 3 or 4 months before he's assassinated, Ben-Gurion just resigned from office, I believe. The next prime minister comes in. He sends another letter. Kennedy said, not just no, hell no, unless we can be there to inspect that you're really doing what you say you're doing. And, November 22nd, he gets assassinated. And then right after that, they end up stealing hundreds of pounds of uranium, I believe, out of the, and I forget the name of it, but it was the plant that made it, the material, Pennsylvania.
Incident.
I didn't hear you, Chaticle.
Chaticle, you keep breaking up.
Change
your headset.
Bad service.
You keep breaking up.
And so people in the the intelligence community knew that was going on. We let it happen. Part of that was because of James Angleton, who was one of the founding fathers of the CIA, coming out of OSS, who was in charge of the Israel desk, but then also for counterintelligence. But then all of counterintelligence, I believe, from that region had to go through his desk as well. And he became very, very, very close with the Israelis, and was like, he's quoted, or they're quoted of saying about him that he is like a Zionist. Like he was the top Zionist of them all, even though he wasn't, Jewish. And they knew that if the thought was if they tried to, bring up this as an issue, that the investigation or to be able to actually do anything was pointless, because it would just get shut down, like people in the FBI, people in CIA, etc. So it just kind of happened, and the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of a disturbing idea to think that we had a kind of coup, right? And LBJ was extremely pro-Israel all throughout his life, and very much pushed a lot of their agenda. and their interests. Whereas the Kennedys tended to be very skeptical of the Israelis for all kinds of reasons, not least of which their connections with Irish organized crime versus Jewish organized crime.
Yeah.
And so there's a sort of history there that's kind of interesting. And, there's a lot of people in the Kennedy family that believe, not just John F. Kennedy, but also John F. Kennedy Jr. and Robert Kennedy were all assassinated by people connected with the Israelis in one form or another.
Yeah, I think that people, they always will pull up. So there's like some famous things that aren't true about, well, why was Kennedy killed? Because he was doing something with, he was going to change the Federal Reserve and issue United States Treasury notes. It was something like that. And it was an executive order. Well, it was an executive order that we had to print a certain amount of United States Treasury bills that weren't Federal Reserve notes. That continued to happen even after he was killed. Lyndon Johnson did it. So that's fake. So there's all these other fake becauses that have been debated over the years. So that when I talk about the facts that we just laid out there, and then that the policy of the United States government towards the Middle East took a total 180 because Kennedy wanted to work with the Arab world versus what we have now.
He also wanted a lot of the Israeli people in the U.S. and supporters of theirs to register.
Yes,
right? He wanted to register under FARA, and this was a non-starter for a lot of them.
Yeah, because you can notice when you look at the FBI file on like the ZOA, there hasn't been like any attempts by the Justice Department, at least it appears, for that to happen since like 1967 or something like that. So you can tell that a lot of things just didn't even become a lot of policies changed, I guess I would say, like 180 degrees after that happened. There's a lot of stuff that happened in the 60s that kind of transformed the country totally. And I don't think that we've been educated about why those things happened at all. There's just been a lot of miseducation and, things like that. So our sense making ability has been degraded for a long time over like basic core things.
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And I think it's becoming more and more interesting to watch how people are thinking these things through in a real way. I mean, so the article I posted from the Jewish Chronicle, some of it comes from Dan Abrams, and Dan Abrams, is the son of Floyd Abrams, the one who litigated the famous free speech issues. And Floyd Abrams is, of course, married to an Israeli. So that would be Dan Abrams' mother. And so there's interesting tie-ins there. And of course, he covers a lot of court issues, court dramas, and all the rest of it. And there's sort of always a question of assassinations, right? Are they lone nuts? Is this for an intrigue? Right? There's always this question around an assassination. And it's interesting how oftentimes it's decided that it shall be a lone nut, even though the evidence in question very much points in the direction of it not being a lone nut, of it being an organized plot to assassinate people. So that's just sort of useful to think through.
Yeah, and then it's always pushed to degrade like whatever systems and institutions that we have here. While I'm not saying, obviously, there's very bad elements of everybody's institutions, or can be. It's always done to focus just on the ones that we share, as Americans. And you're not allowed to talk about anybody else that would have had an interest in making those things happen. That's just it's disgusting in my opinion. And, it's over. We're going to talk about this stuff, and that's what we're doing in the spaces, and it's great.
Yeah, I would say, too, the other thing that's very interesting on this stuff that is worthwhile of attention is, we have a history here that Robert Kennedy has of drug addiction, right? And of getting in trouble with the drug world. And I think that's something that we need to kind of think about what that actually means, what that's actually about. And Oftentimes, people get in trouble, they get blackmailed because they're sons of very prominent people, right? We could talk about, the whole American PSYOP thing that was done about Wesley Clark Jr., where basically what happens is you are the child of somebody who's very famous, and you become a target for all these influence operations, somebody who's involved in the government in some serious way. And I think this is sort of like not really well understood how this stuff like really works in practice, but you become kind of free range to fuck with. And when we think about somebody like a Hunter Biden, here's a guy who seemingly was getting targeted by all these like crazy networks over the years, and yet he like turned the tables on all of them. And they all got busted, got arrested, whatever happened to them. I mean, my piece is Hunter Biden to Fed or Hunter Biden as a confidential informant. The two pieces I did on that, I think are going to stand the test of time and have heard as much. So there's something kind of very brave about people who are the sons and daughters of politicians actually electing upon themselves to go and push back against some of these influence operations. And I think that's what we're going to discover when it's all said and done about Hunter. That famous scene from The Departed, right, where he says, "Do you want to be a cop or do you want to appear to be a cop?" Right. That's, I think, what happened with Hunter Biden.
I'll tell you something I just saw, and I'll post the article after I get done kind of talking about what it is. But do you know who Chabad is meeting with to try to get their books back for the Rebbe's books, I guess, that have been in Russia?
Who's he meeting with? Who are they meeting with?
Hunter Biden.
No fucking way.
That is,
yes, way.
On one of the previous spaces, I put it on the Jumbotron. I saw it. Did you see it on a COL type thing? Because that's where I saw it. Like,
yeah, I can't remember exactly where I saw it, except I knew it came in, and I'm like, what? I'm like, and I had something else going on, but I was like, I put it in the back of my, things to do when I wasn't busy was to go back and look at what was going on with that. So, yeah.
Well, I know Hunter Biden's new wife, so she's a Jewess from South Africa, and apparently she has all kinds of weird connections with British intelligence, which is also deeply funny to me. Makes you wonder, right? Makes you chin stroke on these things.
Yeah, it's so when I saw it, my first reaction was I think that there's more to, like, I think that there's more evidence that your thesis about what's going on with Hunter Biden is just more and more true. And it's like I don't know, I don't want to speculate, but it's just very, very interesting. That's all.
And what do we make of like this informant, like, who ran away, right? We had the Gal Luft guy, right, who was arrested in Cyprus for basically getting engaged here, and he basically fled a Cypriot jail, which is all very strange. And he was the one. Luft is his name, Luft. If somebody wants to put that up in the Jumbotron, that could be quite helpful. But Luft was an Israeli activist, scientist type. And I think that's quite interesting. And of course, Yaakov Appelbaum was somebody who started proving the whole question of, he was very heavily engaged in the whole January 6th matter of using facial recognition there. And Yaakov Appelbaum also works very closely with Jim Hoft over at Gateway Pundit. So there's this sort of like efforts by the Israelis, seemingly, to build an alternate sense-making apparatus that would basically establish kind of like what they wanted to push out there. So quite telling, quite interesting, quite fascinating. And I don't know if we'll ever get the full account of it, but it is interesting how many people from DC, including some Republicans, have been like, hey man, like, you were right about the whole Hunter Biden being a Fed thing. I was like, well, obviously, like, you can't do that much coke and fuck that many whores without the US government somehow being involved. Like, I'm sorry, it's just how it works. And frankly, if he was doing that level of drugs in his 40s, like, he's a medical miracle in and of himself. And frankly, that should be a strong case for why Joe Biden should be allowed to be reelected as president, because clearly those are some really strong genes.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's superhuman, like cocaine, crack smoking strength to be able to do that and function at all is really amazing.
Yeah, special talent.
He's doing the coke that Americans won't do. You know, and crack no less too. So yeah, I think it's pretty impressive, pretty interesting.
I see Tom posted the article that you were talking about before on the Jumbotron.
With Gal.
What'd you say?
With Gal Luff. Which one? Oh, the article I wrote. I haven't seen it. Oh yeah, yeah. So that's interesting. I hadn't seen this. Chabad Kunin. Yeah, it's interesting, right? So when did this story come out? I haven't seen this as yet.
I think it said like 6 days ago.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty obvious what he is, right? Doesn't it speak for itself?
I'd be interested to get Caravel's take because I think he's Hunter Biden Fed skeptic, and so what do you see from it? What are you thinking?
Well, personally, from what I mean, it just seemed like he was at an event, and it seemed like he knew the family, and he was kind of just being polite. That's what I saw. Maybe just more to him. He was just going, yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, books for sure, absolutely. Oh for sure, like, yeah, let's take a picture. Yeah, fuck out of here. I don't know. That's what I got, but it could be just more.
No. There's a long tradition of people using their family members as vehicles for national security related matters, particularly as spies tend to travel in families.
Does he have connections to Russia, to Putin and stuff?
Well, if you look at Hunter's history, he's always meeting with spies, and those spies are always getting arrested, and he's always ends up being fine. So you have to imagine living in a world. So, like, this is how I know it actually works. Okay, when you're a spy, right, or a confidential informant, or a CHS, or what have you, and you're doing all these favors for the U.S. government, the U.S. government like has no problem with you taking and keeping some of the money that you're getting paid, right? Like they don't care because you're doing a solid for Uncle Sam. So there's that aspect of this, which I think is really quite telling and interesting. So here's kind of my assessment of what happened. So there's potential gun charges and there's potential IRS charges. Now you can just throw those IRS charges in the garbage. Like those will never happen. He will never get in trouble for that. Okay, it's just never going to happen. Sorry, like people can believe whatever they want. Maybe he'll have to pay some nominal tax penalty or whatever. And then what will happen is they'll go leverage somebody else who's compromised, who's a spy or whatever. And then they'll form a new business with Hunter Biden and then they'll pay his tax liability. Because what happens is people get in trouble with the U.S. government all the time. And what happens is they then cut a deal with Uncle Sam and they become helpful in all kinds of interesting, exotic ways. So that's how it goes. So, I mean, I've had people want to bet me on this, or whatever, but nobody's seemingly taking my bets anymore these days.
Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't be very smart of them.
So the other aspect of this, too, that I know is that the Federalist, which is pushing all this stuff, that's a Likud publication, right? It's backed by Barry Side, right? So there's a lot of these publications which are pushing the Hunter Biden as Hunter Biden as like crackhead, where's Hunter, all the rest of it nonsense. There's a number of these places that are pushing that, right? And that sort of needs to be understood in that context as well. So
yeah. You can see all these Twitter accounts. I mean, George Santos tweeted it. George Santos, the first thing he tweeted after he got indicted, he comes back to Twitter, "Where's Hunter?" All captions.
Yeah. Ask yourself what the fuck that's about.
Yeah.
Look, remember the other day, May 12th, marked the 1998 was when the Israelis admitted that Jonathan Pollard was one of theirs. Okay? That means that he was arrested in 1985. So that means for 13 years he was in a federal prison and the Israelis never admitted he was one of theirs.
When you put it like that, I mean, it took them 1 year to admit about that. The journalist, what's her name? I forget her name. But the journalist who got shot in the head, and they denied it, and they were like, people saying, "Oh, we're gonna sue you," and then they're like, "Oh yeah, it was us." You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, Shireen Abu
Yeah,
Akleh.
yeah. So, yeah.
So
Absolutely.
think about that. Just like cogitate on it, like chin stroke on it, right? And then he's like supposedly doing this deal with this Patrick Ho character. Patrick Ho is a Chinese intelligence officer. What happens to the Patrick Ho character? He gets busted trying to evade or trying to basically do all this bribery stuff in Africa, where the US wants to sweep China out of Africa. So Hunter Biden, to my mind, is some kind of weird patriot. And I think it's pretty amazing that we live in a world with people like him. You know?
He's definitely a very fascinating character. One for the books.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense, though, if you think about it, right? Like, let's say you're a fuck up, right? Which some of us are fuck ups. Some of us are the black sheeps in our family. Like, let's just be real about that, right? There's a lot of us who are like that, if we're just honest about it. And so let's say you're a fuck up, and let's say your father's favorite brother dies of like a weird cancer. So naturally, what do? You're like super depressed about that. So you go fuck fuck his widow, right? And your marriage falls apart. The favorite brother is dead. And so what do? You try to join Navy intelligence, right? And he does try to join Navy intelligence. And what happens? They say that he pops a positive on a drug test. Now, I don't know, if I'm the Navy and I'm recruiting people, maybe I create the illusion that he popped a positive on a drug test, or maybe he pops positive on a drug test and that's an argument for why he never actually was in the Navy. Or maybe he's sheep dipped into the Navy, which is something that happens all the time for naval intelligence, for other intelligence assets out there. And I know there are people in this space who are law enforcement, and they know what I'm talking about. There's all kinds of ways in which people become assets of the government. All kinds of exotic, exciting, interesting ways in which that goes down. So that's my theory of the case on it, if that makes sense. And I posted it up in the Jumbotron. I've written about Hunter quite a lot in very kind of almost favorable light. And I think this is one of those ones where I'm going to be absolutely 100% right.
You think we'll ever find out, like, publicly?
I think so. I think we'll find out some version of it. Or more precisely, we'll see the whole thing kind of go away. That would be my sense of it.
I mean, that's going to be a big... just so you understand, the entire right, like, that's what they're holding on. For it to go away, that would take some pretty strong, pedaling away from the whole sphere online and everything.
Well, I mean, how often is the right, the sort of crazy MAGA right, how often are they correct about things?
Yeah, not a lot. Not often.
So the big whistleblower who was supposedly going to come forward was Gail Luft. Okay? Gail Luft was the big whistleblower. And, you look up, like, who is this person? Right? Mm-hmm. Gail Luft. And you look at him, and he's, like, very obviously Israeli.
Shocker.
So, and then, of course, he disappears. And we're just supposed to be like, okay, that's normal. Yeah, so here's the article. Israeli professor wanted for arms dealing vanishes before U.S. extradition. So this dude was like chilling in a Cypriot jail. Let me read this to you. This is from the Jerusalem Post, okay? Israeli professor wanted for arms dealing vanishes before U.S. extradition. The Israeli professor was released on bail while a court deliberated on his extradition to the U.S., where he is wanted for arms trafficking charges. That's totally normal. Israeli professor, the Gal Luft. Like, imagine having a class with a professor who gets busted for arms dealing. Just think about that, right? So Israeli professor Gal Luft, who is wanted by U.S. authorities for arms dealing, has gone missing in Cyprus after a Larnaca court had released him on bail, Cypriot websites File News reported on Wednesday. Luft had been arrested at Larnaca International Airport in southern Cyprus after Interpol issued an arrest warrant against him on suspicion of arms trafficking to China and Libya. He was then slated for extradition to the United States. The Larnaca District Court released him while deliberating on the U.S. extradition request after it ordered him to pay 150,000 euros as a guarantee, to put up another 250,000 with a guarantor, and to present himself at the central police station at Fafos, where he lived at the time, at regular intervals. On March 28th, Luft did not appear at the Fafos police station as required. On the same day, his lawyer declared Luft a missing person and expressed concern for his client's life. Luft's abandoned vehicle was discovered a day later, and according to Fila news sources, Cypriot police are considering the possibility that Luft has left the country entirely. Pretty much speaks for itself. And he is supposedly the informant that James Comer has built his whole case on. Think about that, to borrow a phrase. Think about that. The House Oversight Committee is investigating the explosive claims by Dr. Gal Luft, a former Israel Defense Forces lieutenant colonel with deep intelligence ties in Washington and Beijing. Where is key witness Gal Luft? The Hill declines GOP subpoena on Biden alleged criminal scheme. And there's Steve King tweeting about it. Had a feeling this whistleblower was Gal Luft. Biden had him arrested in Cyprus under bogus charges. These are just tweets about this stuff. I don't know. Kind of weird stuff, man. Makes you think. Well, I don't know. Does anyone else have anything they want to add on this? Because otherwise, I think we may call it a day. I don't know you, sir, Mr. Hussein Hill, the narrative assassin. That is a pretty dope name. I'm not going to lie.
I know him. I've talked to him before. Maybe bring him up.
Is he full of shit? What do you think, Chadigal?
No, I've talked to him a couple of times. I've known him for a while.
All right, Chadigal, if you misbehave.
He owns a newspaper in North Carolina.
Oh, well, if he owns a newspaper, he must be literate, so we'll have him up. And we'll have Karsh up, too, because that's just entertaining. He's a good dude. Assalamu alaikum, Karsh.
Yeah. I'm MAGA, and I'm pro AF and MAGA. So I don't think that your characterization is accurate, sir. I think that, quite frankly, we understand that Israeli subversion is occurring, but I think that also we also know that MAGA is the one true the actual place for us to be, man. You know. Chuck Johnson, please respond.
You vouch for this dude, Chadigal. Chadigal, I told you, Chadigal.
I talked to him before.
You Chadigal.
I'm talking to you.
I mean, I think he understands.
Chadigal.
Chuck Johnson.
Naughty boy.
Chuck,
naughty
I'm talking
boy.
to you, man.
Hold on, Hussein. Hold on. You understand
no.
Trump
Not
freed all
tonight.
the Israeli spies and everything, right?
What's that?
I was telling him, I was like, you know that Trump freed all of the Israeli spies and all that, right? Like they were deeply embedded in the presidency and all that.
Yeah, he literally pardoned all of them. What are we? Do we not think that actually happened? Do people not read? I don't know, man.
Pardoned them.
You know,
he
literally.
He wasn't
Trump's.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jonathan Pollard, who broke. He was a huge spy with the Russians. Jonathan Pollard gave up all kinds of information for the Russians and the Israelis, which killed people that family members of mine knew. Okay, this is not a theoretical whatever blah 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 thing. He was literally stealing information and getting people killed, right? And he flies back to Israel on Sheldon Adelson's plane, Trump's largest donor and the largest donor to Bibi, where he meets Bibi and he literally kisses the ground when he lands. I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm gonna have to chin stroke on this one. It seems like that was a bad thing. Oh, and then what does President Jared Kushner do? Jared Kushner pardons. Okay, what does he do? He pardons who? He pardons Abrielle Sella, the handler of Jonathan Pollard. Like, are we not supposed to notice this, or like, what's the deal? Like, are we supposed to like turn off our eyes, or like, are we supposed to like pretend we can't read English? Like, what are we supposed to do in these kind of situations?
Well, then my other question too would be like, why would we think under a second presidency of Trump that same thing like, wouldn't happen again? You know,
Bro, that shit would
like,
happen all the time because he would have no prospect of being reelected, right?
right.
So he would just go ham on the pro-Israel stuff.
Chaticle, you're forgetting the biggest issue at hand, which is Bud Light.
Yes.
And that's
does the chick
Yeah.
selling the Bud Light to me have a dick? Yes or no? That is the question. You know, other nations, other peoples have asked the question of to be or not to be, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. But our society has decided that whether or not the Bud Light chick has a dick is the question du jour. And they want you to be very angry if she has a dick or doesn't have a dick or has a dick but says it's a she. I don't know. I could never keep up on all this like weird stuff. Frankly, like when I see the trannies, I just feel bad for them, you know? It just feels kind of sad to me.
Yeah, I have like a visceral like gut like reaction to it. It's just like it's very like uneasy. It's like the uncanny valley, like looking at like a robot that like seems to be human or something like that, but you can tell it's not. It's like it's the same thing as looking at like one of the sex dolls. Have you seen these?
Yeah, the sex dolls freak me out too. Honestly, I like kind of like women that were born women that like being women. I feel like that's like, you know, going to be illegal in the future. So, you know. I always tell
Yeah,
people
it's
though, if I
been
had a choice, I'd
written.
choose being gay because it seems like that's where we're going anywhere. It's just a matter of time before it's compulsory. You know.
Yeah,
Just
I
the
mean,
way
it
it's going
has
to
been
go.
written that that's the way that it's going to go. I mean, you know, it's been predicted.
No, you could see a future, right, where there's some like crazy virus or whatever, and they discover it's spread through heterosexuality, right? And what happens is the government's like, listen, we're banning
Kind of like
heterosexuality.
AIDS, but for straight people.
Yeah, or something like that. I don't know what we'd call it. Let's call it the Macarena. Okay? So the Macarena spreads through sexual transmission of heterosexuals, but not through homosexual conduct or homosexuality. And so what happens is the government decides that we are going to ban heterosexual activity, and that's just how it is. And we have this problem of like new births and everything. You know, like the population is cratering, but you know it'll be for environmental reasons, like go gay to save the planet. That'll be the narrative that's pushed. We need a lower population, and what will happen is those of us who still engage in heterosexual sex, like we'll be criminals, right? We'll be outlaws. That'll be how it goes down. And we'll have all the state come after us, and you know there'll be all these kind of like furtive ways we kind of hide that we're heterosexual still. And but you know you'll get caught and then they'll chemically castrate you. You know, it's for your own good, right? And so that'll be the future that we're going to live under when we have the Macarena and it's spreading, you know, to the whole population. And of course, people will have children through IVF, but those children will have to have their genetics approved of beforehand by a panel. That'll be how it goes down. You heard it here first, folks. I got to be careful though because I don't want to give Klaus Schwab any ideas. So
I think he's already got him.
he may well do. You know, one thing I like to do, I call this the German frame, where I say whatever's going on historically, and I say it in a German accent. So, we will make heterosexuality illegal. You could see them saying that, for sure. You'll be banned from eating all kinds of meat, ladies. Sorry, it's just how it's going to be. You're not going to be allowed to have any kinds of meat.
And we absolutely will count every single calorie, and it will not go over X amount. You'll be cut.
That's right. And of course, the way they'll do it is they'll use these Israeli products, one of which is called Anyvision or Usto, and they'll monitor you just like they monitor the Palestinians. But unlike the Palestinians who keep producing more Palestinians, unfortunately for the Israelis, because the Israelis always boast to us about their high birth rate. The Palestinians really do fuck. Like, there's nothing to do in Gaza other than be oppressed and have children, apparently. So what they do is they have like very large families, which is good for them. And good for them as a form of defiance, is like bringing more children into the world that are like them. But anyway, so what ends up happening is they're going to put us all into like digital concentration camps, and we're all going to be sterilized if we decide to be heterosexual. Because the Macarena, it's a dangerous virus, And of course, we'll all take a vaccine to deal with the Macarena, but that vaccine will make a lot of us sterile. That's for our own good. Anyway, Karsh, go ahead. Polly, welcome. Oh no, dear Tom is dropping down to listener. Go ahead, Karsh.
Hey Charles, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, I was gonna say to you, with all these spaces, do you record them? Do you save them anywhere? I mean,
I put some of them out there. I record most of them, and people are, of course, welcome to listen to my crazy ramblings and musings and different things.
Yeah,
of course,
where
Tom,
did you post it though?
We post them. I don't know that we post them on the internet. Do we put some on the internet?
Oh,
we
is
have
it like?
them. Yeah. I mean, you make a very solid point. Maybe I should start like getting these spaces and posting them on my Substack, because I think there's an element which makes this kind of more fun.
Yeah, like because I know all the spaces. I used to think that you could just go back. It would be like something that you stream, and you could just watch at your own time. But apparently,
what do you think, Tom? Do you think we should do that? Do you think we should like save these and put them up on the Substack?
100%. 100%.
All right. All right. You persuaded me.
Cheers.
Let me talk to my. I don't think I'm sufficiently nerdy to figure out how to get the audio file from this, but others in this space are. So
there's bots that people have set up that will save archives of these to Telegram. I don't know how to do it, but I know that there's a way.
Interesting. You need to stop sending me the video of the Clintons doing the Macarena. It's too on brand. Whoever's doing that, it's pretty funny. But I'll put it up at the Jumbotron. But it's a little too funny. Yeah, Hillary Clinton does the Macarena. Here we go. I'm posting that up in the Jumbotron. Go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah, hello, Charles.
Welcome.
Yeah, just more on the topic of the Twitter's new CEO.
Yes.
I came a little bit late because I just heard you were about to end the call. Yeah, I mean, what do you think about it? She seems to be WEF material. Like, that was my initial impression.
Oh yeah, wife material. You like the Italian?
No, like the WEF material, WEF material. But yeah, they're.
Oh, WEF. Oh, forgive me.
Yeah.
I thought you said she's wife material. I mean, maybe both, right? Who's to say? Let's not judge here, lest we be judged. What can I say about that? Yeah, I mean, the World Economic Forum is a Nazi outfit, right? Like, if you follow the history of it, it sort of speaks for itself. It's World War II ended, and as you know, everyone became not Nazis anymore just by magic. It was like, snap your fingers, dance around a little bit, throw some money to Israel, and like suddenly you're not a Nazi anymore, right? That's how it works. That's the sort of post World War II history right there. Look, she is working at NBC Universal, heavily Chinese compromised. She is, of course, the daughter of an Italian cop who shot somebody, okay, as one does. And we talked a little bit about policing and its difficulties and how they used to police people a lot more aggressive back in the day. And of course, we talked about how her father was training all these people who are foreign nationals. So she's a cop's daughter, right? And probably a compromised cop's daughter. And she's an ad executive in an era in which interest rates are going up, and people just don't consume as much in that kind of space. Just not how it goes down, right? So when you have higher interest rates, people don't consume as much, therefore ad revenue falls, which is kind of what you see historically. So anyway, you kind of change the composition of consumption when that kind of thing happens.
So why the pressure? Why the pressure to bring her on? Is it because he's not making
Oh, it's
enough?
very simple. He's getting pressure from the Tesla investors and from the SpaceX investors that he's fucking around too much on Twitter, which he is. And so what they're saying is, we need you to focus on these things we've invested, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in, and you need to go find a professional CEO. And he's probably got some kind of deal structured where she has to bring in all this revenue, and it's sort of seen as a steady pair of hands. Though anyone who's paying attention knows that the chairman the chairman role he still has, and the CTO role he still has. So how this is going to work in theory, in practice, very much a kind of unclear question. So anyway, make of that what you will. I see we have Holly Cakes and Polly. I'll be honest, Holly, I let you up just because we had Polly already, and I thought that would be kind of funny. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah, many people they did some analysis. It seems that she's using her hands a lot, like in a very Italian fashion, when she speaks. So many people thought Elon was swindled by her hand movements and like.
Well, as you know, Italians always engage in very honest behavior, particularly in business dealings. In fact, oftentimes when you hear the word honest, you think Italian, right? Always, always. Especially from Long Island. Nobody from Long Island would ever be engaged in criminal behavior, like, I don't know, say George Santos, maybe. I don't know. Just something to think about. Something to think about, Adrian.
Okay.
Well, I guess we'll see, right? We'll see.
No, that's good. I mean, thanks for your analysis on this. I'll let others speak. Might chime in at some point.
Yes, of course. Go ahead. Go ahead, Polly or Holly, whichever wants to go first. We might have a knife fight between you to decide who goes first. But go ahead, either one.
So, with the Macarena virus, like, do we have to be gay, or can we just
do. We do. Unfortunately, well, as you know, bisexuality doesn't exist among men, so there's that. But yes, you have to be a lesbian. I'm sorry, it's just how it spreads. And you'll be allowed like one kid maybe if you're good, and we'll have the IVF facility pick you up, and you'll have to take the right drugs so you can have your kid in our very polluted world. And that kid will go through they'll sequence the embryos, they'll rank order them based upon which ones are going into the mama's oven. And this is a very touching story for Mother's Day, I admit, but yeah, that's what's happening. The Macarena is contagious and it's dangerous, and it'll really destabilize society, so we have to ban heterosexuality. I'm sorry.
So we can't just ban sex?
Nope, it has to all be banned. I don't know about banning sex, but maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll install these devices. We'll call them Ring cameras in our homes, or we'll call them Alexa's devices, and they'll snitch on us when we fuck. That'll be how it goes.
Wow, that's...
Yep. I don't make the rules, Polly. I just predict the future. Just something to think about. Of course, like all trends, this will happen first on the coast and eventually get to Minnesota. So I think you'll be free for some time before you have to submit.
Well, we do have one of the largest per capita gay communities, so I think
Well, maybe you're ahead of the curve, and I think you have Target too, as I understand it, and so yeah, you're good to go. You've got all the essentials for the future.
Yeah, we're set. Well, that's relieving.
Yep, has to be done. I'm afraid. And of course, Ilhan Omar is going to run the death squads in Minnesota because that's how it has to be.
Oh my God, that fraud. Seriously.
Well, I love the fact that all of these like members of the squad, I love the fact that AOC is dating a guy who looks like me. Like, I'm 100% for that. I'm into it. So I like it personally. I think it's hilarious. I love all these like, Black and Hispanic women who are part of like, talking about white supremacy, dating and marrying and fucking white guys. It makes me laugh. I know I'm not supposed to laugh about it, but it does make me laugh.
It's curiosity.
Yep. Anyway, go ahead, Holly.
Hi, so you're hilarious, and I didn't mean to request to be a speaker, but I'm really enjoying this, so thank you.
You're welcome. But yes, well, I think that's been enough for the evening, unless anyone has anything else that they want to add that's pressing and burning. I generally don't let people up who have pictures of themselves as cold brew. Delicious though cold brew is, I feel like that's not exactly the kind of thing we're going for here, sir. So yeah, if you've never tweeted too, probably not going to bring you up in this space. And I don't even really know what plasma physics inspiring, empowering every prediction happening right now. I don't really know what any of that's about, but I'm afraid it's 1 a.m. and I don't really have the energy to figure it out. So probably won't have you up either. Sorry, as the Canadians would say, or our Minnesota friends would say. So with that, I hope you guys all have a lovely start of your week, and that those of you who are mothers or expecting to be mothers, despite the Macarena, that you have a very lovely lovely Mother's Day. And honestly, every day is Mother's Day. That's kind of what the propaganda is. So we're gonna go with that, And to all the surrogate mothers out there, of which there are many. There are lots of women out there who become mothers to people, even though they're not biologically mothers. And I myself have had a number of motherly figures in my life who've taken care of me, set me on the right path, and I hope they have a lovely Mother's Day too. So, including the one who always listens to these spaces and tells me that I need to be more polite and more gentlemanly. I'm trying, Karen. Alrighty, chat soon and have a good week ahead of you.